All right, so there's still some confusion on domain and range. So I want to kind of go over this a little bit more with you. So I think everyone's pretty good at knowing, of course, that the domain is going to be all your X values and your range is going to be all your Y values. And the key word here is all because you have to include all of them. So if I have just some points, and this is something you guys are pretty good at, let's just say I have a point here, which would be -2, +1. Or we'll say a point here, which looks like it's 3, 3. And a point here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, -3. So if I'm going to write my domain, that's going to be all my X's. And you usually write your domain and range in these curly brackets. You're going to put your X values in order. So -2, 3, 5. And your range, kind of the same thing. You're going to put them in curly brackets. Now you're going to be looking up and down. So I'm going to start at -3, +1, +3. Oops, don't need two commas. All right, your domain and range, pretty straightforward. But let's see what happens if I now connect these dots. Let's see how that's going to change our domain and our range. So now remember, when you have a segment, it's really comprised up of little tiny dots everywhere, little points all the way along here. So now by connecting them, I've included all those points in between. So for instance, I would have -1 is part of it, but -0.5 would be part, or -0.01, or -0.001. So I can't list them all because there's too many to list. So the way that I would work it is that my X's start at -2, they continue all the way to 5, and X's between, and I'm going to have less than or equal signs in between those. Now, if this here happened to be an open circle here, then this would just be less than, not less than or equal to. But we have a closed circle, so we're going to say less than or equal to. And by writing it as a conjunction this way, I've listed all of these points in between. So now let's take a look at the range. Well, my range starts here at -3 and goes all the way up to +3. So it starts at -3, it ends at +3. I'm talking about the range, so it's Y, and it's going to be less than or equal to that. So my Y's will be between -3 and +3. So by doing it now, you've connected all those points in between. Let's take a look at a linear graph, see what happens. So now if I have some sort of a linear graph, it doesn't really matter what it is, use a different color. Some sort of a graph like this. So when you're trying to find your domain, basically what I do is I look on my x-axis. So I'll look to the left and I'll look to the right of my graph. And I try to see, is there anything that x's can't be? Well, x could be here, 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 right? I have values for each one of those. And this goes on and on forever. So x can be anything in this part of my graph. And I'm going to look over here. Well, my graph, whoops, sorry. My graph goes on and on forever over here, so it can be anything here too. So my domain is going to be all real numbers. It can be anything. If I take a look at my range, now I'm going to look at the top and the bottom of my graph because that's my y-axis. Well, if I look up here, this goes on and on forever. It can be anything here. And if I look down here, it can go on and on forever. So if I have a linear function, my domain and range are going to be all real numbers. Well, let's see if that's true for all linear functions. Let's see if I have a graph that looks like this. Oh, yes. All right. Well, now if I look at my domain, again, I'm going to look at the right and left of my graph. My graph goes on and on forever, so that'll be all real numbers. But now if I look at my range, the only thing that my range is 1, 2, 3, 4, is 4. So my range would have to be y equals 4 because that's the only thing that the range can be. Now let's take a look at a parabola. All right, let's say I have a vertex here at 3, -2, And we'll say my parabola opens up. And again, if I take a look at my domain, if I look at the right and the left, my domain can be anything. There's no restrictions on my domain. But if I take a look at my range up and down, I don't see any y values below this line here. So there's no y values less than -2. All my y values are greater than -2. So my range would be y is greater than or equal to -2. And again, you could put those in curly black brackets if you want to. All right, so I hope that helps.